Welcome to the Physician's Guide to Financial Wellness, the podcast dedicated to helping physicians in Michigan turn their professional success into financial success while enjoying life along the way. And now, here are your hosts, Andrew Mushbaugh and Trent DeBruin.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Physician's Guide to Financial Wellness. This is Andrew Mushbaugh, and I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, Trent DeBruin. And today we're going to shift gears a little from discussing the purely financial side of the equation when it comes to managing your finances, and instead focus on another important area of financial wellness, which is your relationship with money. And don't worry, we'll do our best to avoid any Maury or Dr. Phil play-by-play commentary here. So we'll go through a deeper dive on the softer side of financial wellness, but really this is a relatively consistent theme we've mentioned throughout other episodes, which is the importance of factoring in some of the qualitative or non-financial aspects when managing your financial life. And as the title references, we'll go through 5 ways or steps to have a better relationship with money. And to give a breakdown of the 5 areas we'll discuss, number 1 is to give yourself a cushion and live within your means. Number 2 is understanding the purpose of money. Number 3 is understanding your money script, and if married, your spouse's money script. Number 4 is having a plan that you understand in your own terms. And lastly, number 5 is finding the right balance. So Trent, why don't you start us off with the first area to address, which is to give yourself a cushion and live within your means.
Sure, but before I do, I have to mention that this won't be a lecture about skipping that coffee at Starbucks, cutting your own hair, or religiously using Mint.com.
Although I'm sure you'd appreciate skipping the line at Starbucks with Jen, right?
Yeah, I think I'm cursed with Starbucks. Anytime I go with Jen, the line always seems to be about 45 minutes long. And she swears it's never like that when she goes solo. So yeah, skipping that line could have multiple benefits.
Absolutely.
But don't worry, I also won't make this a lecture about skipping Starbucks for the non-financial reasons. And Jen, if you're listening, when we go together, we'll just stick with the order ahead. So back to my initial point and that idea of giving yourself a cushion and living within your means. It isn't because it'll benefit you in the future from a financial perspective, but instead because it helps you in the here and now. If you think about your relationship with money, one of the main goals is to avoid stress or having it occupy too much of your headspace. Well, if you had $0 in savings, a growing credit card balance, and were worried about making your next mortgage payment, it'd be pretty hard not to think about money or feel stress associated with it. Which, if you're listening to this podcast, the odds are fairly high that you aren't facing this scenario of living paycheck to paycheck, but there is a large portion of the population that does experience this, even while earning a high income. So you may have some gratitude or appreciation for what you do have, but money is always relative and there's a spectrum of what feels like quote-unquote enough for each person. You likely have a different starting point than the typical person out there who isn't listening to personal finance podcasts, but knowing how relative perspectives around money are, the idea is to think about how to have an even better relationship with money based on your own situation and perspective. So going back to reducing stress associated with money, the first step is to minimize how often you have to think about money on a day-to-day basis, which is accomplished by giving yourself a cushion and living within your means. Focusing on the first part of giving yourself a cushion, this consists of having enough in your checking account to meet your day-to-day and month-to-month expenses. Taking it a step further, it's one thing to know you have enough money to meet your known expenses, but you should also have enough cushion to meet any unknown expenses, like if your car breaks down, your basement floods, or if your child has a surprise ER visit. This is where having an emergency fund comes into play. An emergency fund can be viewed in several different ways, but the idea is to have money in a savings account or some other liquid account that you can tap into if needed for any surprise expenses that you wouldn't be able to cover from your checking account or ongoing paychecks. By having an adequate amount in your checking account to meet your ongoing expenses, along with having additional money in an emergency fund to cover any unforeseen expenses that might pop up over time, you'll be better able to eliminate or at least reduce the day-to-day stress associated with money. Another easy way to reduce stress around your day-to-day finances is to live within your means. This is the basic concept of spending less than you make. By doing this, and after having enough in your checking account and emergency fund, it allows you to begin saving for goals and provides wiggle room if needed as life inevitably changes. For example, if you're living paycheck to paycheck, what would happen if you lost your job, or if expenses increased from having a child, or if, like we've seen over the past year, the cost of your day-to-day living expenses increases as a result of inflation. Without having wiggle room or a buffer, you have less ability to adapt to changes in the future, changes which you potentially have little or no control over. In many ways, you can think about this concept like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Maslow's hierarchy, or theory, stated that people must satisfy certain needs before they can move to the next area of human growth and ultimately reach the point of self-actualization, or fulfillment. The first step, or need, that has to be met is physiological, having food, water, shelter, etc. which is then followed by the second need, which is safety, or not being worried about your day-to-day environment. In other words, before you can think about money, much less saving for the future or spending money on things you enjoy, you need to first have enough to meet your basic physiological needs and have a sense of safety or security. And bringing this back to your relationship with money, you need to first have enough today to meet your basic needs before you can move on to other areas.
Should we be thinking about trademarking a MD Wealth Management hierarchy of money?
I have a feeling we won't have to worry about that trademark being taken anytime soon.
All right, we'll table it. So moving up the non-trademarked MD Wealth Management hierarchy of money, the next area to address or internalize is understanding the bigger picture of the purpose for money. And in basic terms, the purpose of money is so you can go back to your 30th high school reunion and show everyone how much money you have.
Is that what Maslow was referring to as self-actualization?
Exactly. Yeah, we still have time to fine-tune the wording for the MD Wealth Management hierarchy of money, though.
Plenty of time.
Yeah, and joking aside, the purpose of money is simply a means to an end. In other words, if you were dropped on an island by yourself with $10 million of cash, would that help you? Would you care about what the S&P 500 did today? Ideally, you answered no to both of those questions, and fortunately, you most likely won't be dropped on an island, but hopefully that helps to highlight that money by itself is worthless. It's what money can do for you where the value lies. Money can help buy you freedom, flexibility, and time, and that can feel fairly abstract, so it's helpful to reframe this by looking at retirement as an example. When you retire, assuming you have good health, you immediately have more time during the day because you're no longer working, which gives you flexibility as to how you use your time and determine what your schedule looks like. And if you saved up enough, you have the freedom to travel, play golf, live in Florida during the winter, or whatever else is of interest to you. If you're like most people, and hearing that example, you'd think that sounds like a pretty nice setup to have control over your time, flexibility with your schedule, and the freedom to do what you want when you want. Well, let's look at another example to contrast retirement to. Let's look at a 32-year-old physician with 3 kids, student loans, and $50,000 in their retirement accounts. It's fair to assume they have a little less time, flexibility with their schedule, and freedom to do what they want. Now let's assume that 32-year-old physician won the lottery and now has $50 million. Well, they would then have the freedom to quit their job and pursue what they want to do, have flexibility over their schedule, and be able to quote-unquote buy more time, at least in terms of how you spend your time by outsourcing, cutting the grass, hiring a CPA to file taxes, hiring a chef, etc. This is where the idea of financial independence comes into play. You have the money or financial resources where you can pursue whatever it is that you want, which can be achieved at any age. So you have to be financially independent to retire, but you don't have to retire just because you're financially independent. So clearly having money gives you options, and having more money can give you even more options, but money is still a means to an end. It can't, at least by itself, buy you peace of mind, a purpose, or time that has already passed. So money can buy you time in the sense of what you spend your time on moving forward, but it can't make up for time you've already spent. This is where it's helpful to understand the trade-off of time versus money, which in general follows a similar path. When you're younger, you think about being a third grader, you have more time ahead, but no money. Then during your working years, you start trading your time for money. Then in retirement, you have money, but less time ahead, at least when comparing to your third grade self. So it's important to ensure the time you trade to make the money is worth it, because you can always get more money, but you can't get back more time. And bringing this back full circle, you'll have a better relationship with money if you can internalize what money can and cannot do for you, to ensure you have the right balance of how you spend your time today, how you use or don't use your money, and the reality that the value of money is what it can do for you, not just having money itself.
Yeah, it really is all about striking that balance, which is why one thing I'll gladly spend money on today in order to save time is outsourcing mowing my lawn.
We are definitely on the same page there.
Well, that's a good segue into the next area we'll discuss, which is around money scripts. And a money script is simply your perspective about what money means to you, and is a culmination of your past experiences, views, and natural tendencies that are unique to each person. Money scripts are often influenced by your childhood and upbringing. For some people, your money script may be that money equals security, and if you have enough money, you won't have to worry about your day-to-day needs and can instead focus on other areas. Having a money script like this might be the result of having grown up in a household where money was scarce or was a constant stressor in terms of worrying about whether there'll be enough to go around. Or it could be the result of your unique experiences later in life, like losing a job, losing your pension, or learning from a parent or grandparent who grew up in the Depression era. For others, your money script might be that money equals freedom, where if you have money, then you'll be able to do what you want, travel, go part-time at work to spend more time with your family, pursue nonprofit work, or just not have to think about going out to dinner on a Tuesday night. There's an unlimited number of potential contributors in terms of what shapes your unique money script, and because of that, there are countless different money scripts. So the first step is understanding what a money script is from a higher level perspective. Then the next step, in terms of having a better relationship with money, is working backwards to understand what your personal money script is. This is where it's important to note that your money script isn't necessarily set in stone. It's something that can be changed, at least if you're intentional with working on it. However, it is something that's deeply ingrained for most people. For example, you likely know or have witnessed someone with more money than they'll ever need or spend who still likes to use coupons when grocery shopping or stays at the Holiday Inn when they could easily afford the Ritz-Carlton. There's nothing inherently right or wrong about your money script. It simply is what it is. The only time a money script can start to become a negative thing is when it causes you stress around money. Whether that's tracking your investments on an hourly basis, hoping they don't go down, never feeling like you have quote-unquote enough, or potentially using your time to try and earn even more money without recognizing or realizing what you're giving up, especially if you don't need more money. So when backing into what your unique money script is, it's helpful to start with a couple questions reflecting back on your childhood and experiences along the way. A few good questions here are, what was your earliest experience with money? Or what was money like for you growing up? Or why is money important to you? By answering these questions, you can start to unpack and reflect on your experiences and other subconscious beliefs you might be holding on to when it comes to money. Once you realize your natural tendencies and your unique money script, you can decide whether it's a healthy script for you or one that doesn't cause you stress around money, or alternatively, you might realize that you have an unhealthy money script, or one that's causing you or your spouse or family stress for any number of reasons. It could be that you're so frugal and have such a scarcity mindset that you check in on every purchase your spouse makes, or that you avoid spending on things that could benefit you or your family, like vacations or activities for your kids or grandkids. Or it could be that you ignore money and make financial decisions that are detrimental to you or your family by overspending, or simply hoping that things will work out. As I alluded to earlier, it's one thing to know and understand your own money script, but if you're married, it's equally important to understand your spouse's money script to avoid, or at least minimize, any potential friction around finances. Because money scripts are so unique to each individual and their own life experiences, it's more likely than not that you and your spouse will have different money scripts, i.e. one spouse may be a spender while the other's a saver. If that's the case, it'll be especially important to find the right balance and compromises so that you can both be in a position where money and money decisions aren't a stressor for you.
Yeah, it's always fascinating to hear how different everyone's money script ends up being and all the different parts that add to it. This is why it's so important to understand your and your spouse's money script before the next part we'll discuss becomes beneficial, which is having a plan that you understand in your own terms. And when we discuss having a plan, this can take on many different forms, but in simple terms, we view it as a roadmap or guide of how financial decisions impact your day-to-day living today and into the future. By having a plan, it allows you to project out into the future and feel confident and comfortable with the decisions you make today, that it strikes the right balance of enjoying the present without sacrificing in the future. So what this looks like in practice, at least in the broadest sense, is looking at financial independence or retirement projections. When running these projections, you're starting with the end in mind, looking at where you want to be in the future and what you'd ideally want life to look like. This could be retiring at 50 so you can travel the world or start a nonprofit. It could be scaling back at work after your kids go to college. Or it could be that you enjoy your job but want the flexibility to stop at any point if things change in the future. There's no one-size-fits-all financial plan or roadmap, or need to have everything figured out today of what you want life to look like in 30 years. Regardless of what the initial plan looks like for you, you can always adapt and adjust as life and your preferences change in the future. The important part is to at least have an aiming point so you can back into what actions you should or should not take today. For instance, let's say you love work and can never see yourself retiring. Well, that will mean that you have more flexibility with how you spend your money today relative to someone in the exact same financial position as you, but wants to retire in 10 years. If you're the person that can never see yourself retiring, you may realize you only need to save $30,000 a year toward retirement and can decide to spend a little more today, taking a vacation, buying a nicer car, or you could save even more than required to give yourself additional flexibility in the future. Conversely, if you have a hard stop date of, say, 50, where you want to be able to retire, you may realize you need to save $25,000 more per year in order to remain on track toward hitting that goal. This may mean you have to either A, make more money to save more, or B, cut back in other areas to be able to save more. Or C, you may decide that retiring at 51 and only saving $15,000 more per year is a better balance for you and your family. We won't go through an exhaustive list of scenarios, but the point is that you are taking a quote-unquote gray area, like saving for retirement, and quantifying out what's required on your end in order to meet that goal. From there, you'll have the information needed to make intentional decisions of what to do today. This can help to alleviate any feelings of, I need to save more, or we're fine and retirement will work itself out in the future. And gives you the peace of mind that you're utilizing your resources of time and money in the right balance for you.
Yeah, that idea of balance is so important, and it really is the overarching takeaway or punchline for everything we've discussed so far. And having the right balance allows you to avoid the extremes, like saving every penny to retire by 45, but only eating ramen noodles for 15 years, or deciding to invest every last dollar you have in the stock market without factoring in paying down debt, having an emergency fund, or spending some money along the way. Using that first example of an extreme saver at the expense of your lifestyle, what do you think it'll be like when you do reach age 45? Will you be able to magically flip a switch and spend freely now that you can retire? Or will you continue to be stressed out about spending money for the next 40 years, only to realize you've spent your life saving money and sacrificing without ever really being able to spend and enjoy it? That's not to say you shouldn't be a diligent saver or that there's anything wrong with wanting to be ahead of the game, but apart from just the financial side of the equation, you need to know what you're working toward. More often than not, it comes down to wanting things that money can do for you, which is to provide you with the freedom, flexibility, and time to pursue what you want, when you want, on your terms. This is where you want to understand the trade-offs, whether intentional or not, you would be making to reach your desired end state or goal. If you save every penny, you're giving up time that you'll never get back, whereas if you spend every penny, you're enjoying more today, but at the expense of limiting your options in the future. Everyone is unique, and we're not trying to dissuade anyone from working toward whatever goals are most important to them. Rather, we're trying to help people avoid going down a path with a grass will be greener on the other side mentality. More often than not, the people who have the most peace of mind with the least amount of stress around their finances are those who have a healthy balance across multiple areas. For example, having their day-to-day expenses covered, an emergency fund to provide an extra buffer, and living below their means, which gives them an extra cushion and allows them to save and remain ahead of schedule for their future goals, which are mapped out in a financial plan that's tailored to what's most important to them. By checking all those boxes, you're then free to enjoy a little more today in a guilt-free manner and can realize that not every decision has to be purely financial or that every last dollar needs to be optimized. Ultimately, this allows you to have a better relationship with money by keeping it in the proper perspective.
Yeah, and as we've said on several other podcast episodes, it's hard to understate how valuable that peace of mind around your finances can be. Well, that's everything we wanted to cover today about how to improve your relationship with money. Hopefully that was a helpful overview, and we stuck to our promise of staying clear of any Dr. Phil or Maury-like comments. And so to give a quick recap of what we discussed today, the first step is having enough money coming in to cover your day-to-day known expenses without stressing about how to make ends meet, which comes down to living below your means to provide a buffer. From there, after you have your known expenses covered, the second step is having enough in an emergency fund that's available to cover any unknown expenses in the future and acts as a cushion. Then moving up the MD Wealth Management hierarchy of money, and after you've reduced or ideally eliminated the stress money has on a day-to-day or month-to-month basis, you can zoom out to understand what the purpose of money is. Money is simply a means to an end and is a tool that can provide you freedom, flexibility, and time. However, it's important to understand the trade-offs of time versus money to strike the right balance for you. Knowing the purpose of money is great, but you want to take it a step further to understand your unique money script, which is the culmination of many factors based on your experiences and natural tendencies. Once you understand your money script and your spouse's money script, you can determine if there's anything you should challenge or work on changing to have a healthier approach to money and financial decisions. And it's easier said than done with challenging or changing your money script, but one of the best ways to work on this is by having a financial plan or roadmap based on your unique situation, goals, and preferences. Having this roadmap allows you to project out into the future, to understand what's required to meet your goals, and gives you guidance on what's required today in order to meet those goals. Armed with this information, you can make intentional decisions as to what's most important between enjoying certain things today relative to providing flexibility and options in the future. And that's where the last part, focused on balance, ties everything together. There's no one-size-fits-all solution or shortcut way to having no stress around money or your finances. So the best approach usually involves striking a balance of planning for the future while enjoying things along the way. Well, thanks everyone for joining us for another episode of the show. You can find the show notes at the podcast page of our website, mdwmllc.com/podcast. And if you have thoughts to share or questions you'd like to have answered, please feel free to shoot us an email at info@mdwmllc.com. Take care, everyone, and we'll look forward to talking to you again soon.
Want even more ideas, tools, and resources on how to make smart financial decisions? Check out the resources section of MD Wealth Management's website at mdwmllc.com, where you'll find additional knowledge and insight from Michigan physicians, including a blog, ebook, and one-page guides. While there, you can also schedule a 15-minute conversation with Andrew and Trent to learn more about what it means to work with the firm and how they serve physicians. If you've enjoyed the content, please leave a review on iTunes and share with your friends and colleagues. Thanks so much for listening. Andrew Mushbaugh and Trent DeBruin are certified financial planners, principals, and co-founders of MD Wealth Management, a registered investment advisory firm in the state of Michigan. All opinions shared in the show are for general information and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. All performance referenced is historical and no guarantee of future returns. Please consult with your legal advisor, your tax advisor, or your financial advisor before making any decisions.